So can you tell me a bit more about where you grew up?
Sure. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles called 𝘆𝗲𝗿𝘀. Its closest big city is West Covina, California. A quiet little suburb there in Los Angeles, mostly hardworking families, with two little elementary schools. So we had two elementary schools in the whole little town. Our family lived off the main road to where all the construction cars went through to be able to get to the main road to go to work. So I would watch that kind of flow and figured out, there's a way out of my little suburb ghetto here, because it was really gang infested at the time. And this is now, mind you, almost 45 years ago, when I'm 52, that it was really hard to find your way through the violence. Unlike today, it's social media, right? So people are bullying using social media as a way to feel like they have something against someone else. But this way, people felt like they owned the streets there. So it was kind of, it was a challenge getting through to go to school, to enjoy what I like to do, but at the same time having to get through this, all the altercations that I had to go through. But as soon as I could, I got out of there, let me tell you.
Do you have any specific moments that you remember that made you really want to get out of there?
Sure. I mean, I had the opportunity, I was lucky enough to always to have music in my life. So I did sing in in elementary school and junior high, and I was lucky to be able to get on the bus. The bus was like the way out of the city, right? Out of your area. It was always great to know that you had a home, but I always dreamed every time I had the opportunity to my mother to sign the permission slip, I got to get on a bus. And that bus took me to a museum. It took me to a park. It took me out of my little 4-block radius that I was allowed to go in, and really allow me to see things outside of my own little world. And that gave me an inspiration to know that there was more. So I kind of looked and sought after that in the things that I did to find a way out of my little area.
And in contrast to where you grew up, what's the name of the place where you were born?
I was born in San Luis Potosi, Mexico. So I was born right in the middle center of all Mexico, a little place called San Luis Potosi. And what I can remember are just pictures of my parents, of my mother, me sitting on her lap. It's all I can relate to. And then early on, we were brought here to the States. And then remembering pictures again, because I don't really remember early on until we had our first house in 1972. When I was in 2nd grade, I really remember moving into that house and owning that house and starting to unpack our lives there.
So before then, you lived in apartments as opposed to a house, you mean?
Well, before then, so there's so much story here. My mother, I guess is why I have the passion for singing. My mother was in a mariachi band early on in life when she was 13 years old, and she ran away from home. So she ran away from San Luis Potosi proper all the way down to Tijuana, and with this mariachi band. And she was 13, mind you. I don't know how old the boys were. She was the only woman in the group. And my grandmother found out, and 5 days to get there, found my mother singing on the streets and brought her all the way back and said, "You'll never sing again, you'll never perform again," kind of thing. But my mother has, again, her own voice, and is why I sing, and I'm grateful for that. So it was those things, and I just forgot your question.
I forgot it also, but based on what you said, I had another question.
Yes.
Why did you run away from home?
Because she was my mother, because she wanted something different, right? She saw the opportunity to know that there was something more probably for her herself, getting out of where she was with her family and because she was doing what she loved. She loved to sing. So she didn't see anything wrong with her going out and sharing her voice, right? It's all these restrictions that are put in our place, and we have to choose those choices in our journeys of life, to either go or listen to our parents. And our parents are always right. They always have the best intentions for us, but sometimes we have to spread our wings and fail to know what lies ahead. So either we can keep going the wrong path or know to step back, because we always have our parents there to support us.
So why was she not allowed to sing in her town?
I think, I think back then, especially, um, just like our parents now, it's probably easier if it was a boy maybe singing at the time, but for a girl to go out and be singing on the street probably wasn't the most proper thing to be doing, especially singing mariachi music or music of any culture that is celebrating life and digging into passion and culture. I think often our parents are afraid of us having our own voice and really setting a tone for how we want people to see us, because they're afraid for us. They're afraid for our people really seeing who we are, because then people know how to get to us easier. And our parents just want to protect us. I think my grandmother was just protecting her of the unknown, because music probably wasn't the safest way to go. Even today, if you told your mom, hey, I'm gonna go, you're a rock star, they're like, you probably better rethink that. But in your heart of hearts, you're a rock star. So it's those things that we battle with ourselves.
I'm curious to hear more of your mother's and grandmother's stories.
I mean, it is from what I was given, and it is that I found that as we grow in our lives, we choose our families because we don't know where they come from and how we're connected, and somehow we're connected, and no matter what, we're all connected. But my mother was born in the same place I was born, in Potosi, Mexico. And months before my mother's birth, my grandmother was really ill and was in the hospital and had my mother early. And during those 3 months, my grandmother knew she wasn't going to survive. So her best friend was the neighbor, who is my grandmother. So if you can understand that, my birth grandmother decided to tell the neighbor, hey, please take my daughter, because I know that I'm not going to survive, and ended up taking my mother in. And at that time, adoption wasn't anything. It was people just gave people their children because they knew they couldn't take care of them, or whatever the reasonings were back then. And probably still today, things happen like that through families. But this woman who I know is my grandmother today said, yes, I'll take your daughter, and instantly became my grandmother, and all her daughters became my aunts. And that's all I know, is that story of how my family and my beginnings started. And then it looked like the tradition of that happened to me, because I have 3 brothers and sisters. I have a sister and 2 brothers, and we're all have different fathers. So there's so much story that still goes on, and things of tradition that my mother didn't learn enough, that, unfortunately she wasn't guided enough, and she never went to school, my mother. So she only worked. She worked as early as they made tortillas, in the kitchens, the stories of them selling tortillas to make money, or they all cooked for the different families in order to have this money generated for the family to come in. So in order to have for them to eat. So those early traditions, and again, that's what I love about our early family stories, is that all the love and all of that is built around family and cooking, and right, and tradition in that sense. Where here today we often complain about we don't have enough of this and we don't have enough of that, but we do. We have so much family, but we don't see that. We don't see the love and all the encouragement we get from our family, because we want more of the other things that we don't have. But it's interesting that we know that we can always fall back to the comfort of security, and again, that's tradition. So there is a lot of story that goes on from the beginning of what my grandmother came from. My grandmother fought in wars in Mexico. My grandfather died early on, and so it was my grandmother supporting her daughters, and then my mother just finding her voice early on in that life, knowing that she liked to sing, and she met this group of mariachi singers in Mexico, and they would do the local singing around. And I guess one day they picked up and decided to go to Tijuana, which was at the border of California, there in San Diego, in Mexico. And her first attempt to come across the border failed. And then I believe it was 1964, my mother came again to Tijuana and met a family of 6 girls who were in high school. on their senior year high school trip, having a good time across the border, and met my mother and walked her across just like anybody could. And that's what the question you asked, living situations and how I lived. So back to that story. So then my mother became the maid to one of the girls' families. And as life is, these women became my aunts just instantly. We were all family. All of their kids are my cousins. To this day, they're all my cousins. But my mother started living in their home. So they gave my mother a room, and my mother lived in that room. And then my sister was born. And my sister, who's the eldest, was born in the United States, in California. And then my older brother and I were born in Mexico for some reason. But my mother was then started working for another aunt, and then worked for another aunt. So she was always moved around from place to place within the family dynamic. So they kind of brought us up. And then my little brother was born in 1970. And then one of the aunts started helping my mother develop job security here. And in 1972 is when my mother bought her first house. And it was all from this American family, the Manatter family, who helped support my mother in giving her this purpose here in the United States, and giving her a job and helping her secure security and getting us started. And that's when we got our first house. My mother's still in that house.
So she brought you with her to California, across the border?
She had been living here already, because she had my sister here and had us back and forth. So as soon as she got pregnant somehow with my brother and went back and was in Tijuana and had him in Mexico. And then a year later, went all the way back to visit family and had me in Mexico proper. And then my little brother, who's 3 years younger than me, was born in the same hospital my sister was born here in the United States, odd as that is. So it was very lucky that she had 2 kids born here, and the other 2 of us struggled with not having citizenship in the States. I mean, that's been the biggest struggle up until this past year, but it's so weird to have 2 brothers who were born, it's just an odd thing to have.
What's so hard about that struggle?
Well, a lot of it is because I worked so hard to hide. I had to, unfortunately, hide a lot of the person that I was, because I didn't want to be found out, or whatever that meant. I didn't want to get deported. I felt there was so much weighing on my back that I had to assume someone else and not be as authentic as the person that I truly am, because I had this thing weighing on me that I knew was illegal, right? But I had a brother and a sister who had every rite and passage, and unfortunately I saw so much more for them, and they didn't follow any kind of that path. They took the easy way out, and I worked so hard to be the person I am today, and God bless them. I don't mean to talk bad of my family, but to see how much more they have for themselves, and what they didn't offer themselves to go after, because they lost a lot of opportunities.
So your mother went back and forth between Mexico and California to visit family?
She did often. We had a lot of family still in San Luis Potosi, where I'm from, for a very long time. So she was able to go home, take back clothes, or take money to them. My sister was lucky enough to be able to travel and go meet the family face to face. So that's something still that I want to do. So it was nice that my mother would still stay connected with the family for as long as she could. And as of today, all the elders have passed on. My mother is now the eldest person in our families between Mexico and here that is alive. And that is sad, because I unfortunately haven't got to meet any of them. On a telephone, grateful, I was able to speak to them, but to truly get to meet someone and touch them and know them is that hug, that embrace that you wish for, when you get to meet people for the first time.
Can you describe the moment when you first met them?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, my tia Sofia was able to bring 2 of my girl cousins, one of my cousins has 12 children. So yeah, so this is what they do. They just have children, 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 help support their little clan, and that's what it is. A lot of family, a lot of cultures do that. If you know that if the mother is fertile, they're going to have and start creating this family to help support the family, to help, once the elders get bigger, they're going to start work early, unfortunately, because that is their vision. They don't think school. They don't think, I want my daughter, my son to be a doctor. I want them to be this, this dream for them. They just want them to have the means to support each other and to go to work and to find a job. And, this is old times. And I think often, let's call it a third world country, Mexico, still to this day. They often think that's the first thing. How are we going to help support each other if we're going to keep on putting these families out? Well, they'll help take care of the little ones when they're born so I can go to work. So it's like this thing. I don't know if it's always the best thing to have so many children, because we should be able to support what we can have right in front of us. But everybody's different. But it was amazing to be able to finally put a touch to a name, because we often have conversations over the phone with so many people and don't ever get to meet them. So when I finally got to meet my aunt and my cousins, it was incredible, right? It was real. So it made me even closer to being who I am, because I know that it's out there. It's not just stories that I hear on the phone or the stories I heard from my mother or my grandmother, because I don't remember ever touching the ground of Mexico in itself. I've been to Tijuana often in my life, but that to me is not Mexico proper. Once I'm like where the indigenous people are, I think I'll feel a little more, it's like being here if you're from here and your family is from another country. It's like finally going home to that country. But going to Tijuana is very different because it's still very Americanized. So that culture isn't as dynamic. But it was wonderful getting to meet them. This past summer, my job let me travel to Nashville to work there with the team there. And I have a cousin who is from San Luis I met for the first time this past summer. He's 35. We got to walk into a room, and it was so almost normal, kind of natural, but it wasn't, because I was so nervous. But I knew who he was because of all the pictures I've seen and the times we've talked on the phone. So that the Facebook has helped a lot of keeping things a little more real. So that was wonderful. We both cried for a very long time. Just, I thanked him more than anything. I don't know. And I looked back and I keep thinking, why is this guy thanking me? But his grandmother, my aunt, they really opened their family up to my mother without any regard, without even double thinking it, and allowed us to be part of their family. So all I can ever think is, I'm thankful my mother left. I'm thankful my mother left Mexico and tried something new in this country, because I don't think I would be where I am today if my mother didn't leave Mexico to give us an opportunity. And not that staying there would have been any different, but I just know that the opportunities here were better for me.
How did your mother meet the mariachi band?
What I know of is my mother was always sang in church. And back then, in order for them to call in the people for mass, they put the choir or the singing person out front of the church. And it was my mother. She was always in this white dress with flowers in her hair, singing the verses of mass or whatever it was out in front of the church. So it brought in people. And what I have been told is these boys were like, hey, we like, the way you sing, kind of thing. And my mother was intrigued by them, and there she went, started singing this mariachi music. And that mariachi music is like any traditional, it's music of this telling stories of your hometown and where you're from. And so that's what I think first drew her to it, because she was singing music of her pueblo and of her city, and of Mexico. So that, yeah.
And what else did they tell you about her pueblo?
What I know of, things I've heard from today or from the past is just it's a beautiful place. You know, I think because people don't have so much, they love they love the things around them and they appreciate the little things. So I know that it's a beautiful place. I know that is the cactus capital of the country of the world. Is the nopales are such a huge tradition there, and the fruit, the tuna of the cactus is such a beautiful fruit to eat. If you haven't had that, that is so good. Um, Other than that, you know, again, like any small traditional place that has country, it's really warm and loving. The people are very welcoming. So that's what I look forward to when I go visit. I'm going to go visit there before the end of the year.
And what are your favorite traditions?
Still today, Mexican food. I'm in Mexican 100,000%. So still today, I'll go to those Mexican restaurants that make homemade tortillas there at the place, so you can get the feel and the love of what it took to make that simple little thing that warms you up so much. So those simple recipes like tortillas, I mean, there isn't any one item of a Mexican food that I don't like. So the only thing I don't like is spicy Mexican food. But I do just enjoy all Mexican food, and it just warms me up. And when I eat it, I can hear my grandmother. This sound of her making tortillas in the kitchen is something that warms my heart when I eat Mexican food.
And you said about your grandmother that she fought wars in Mexico?
She was in one of the last wars there. My grandmother was born in 1904. So in the 20s, I believe there's a French war somewhere in there, and she was in her teens with a rifle in her hand. You know, I'm sure our grandparents elaborate a little bit on some stories, but I envision my grandmother there with her braids and her colorful little dress that they always wore. She always had my story that I sent, she always wore ribbons in her hair that tasseled out, and it was just a Mexican tradition that the girls did then. And to the end of her day, I remember her always, when she braided her hair, she would always add in her ribbon. So I can envision the strong little girl there, standing her ground with a rifle in her hand, just protecting her family and her needs. Right? I can envision it, so it's pretty awesome.
And what do you remember about what was told to you about how your grandmother supported her daughters?
My grandmother made menudo. It's a Mexican traditional, it's a pot of pig tripe and hominy, and it's a soup. And my grandmother made menudo and sold it on the corner every single day for, I would say, 50 plus years. And that's how she made money to support the family. My aunt from there, my tia Sofia, one of my aunts, then sold menudo for another 50 years. I would, if not on the same corner, I don't know, but I know that my aunt sold the same thing for 50 years in the same town to support her family.
That's amazing. Well, are there any other family stories that like stand out to you?
I mean, I have another, you know, like I told you early on, I have 3 other brothers and sisters, and we all have different fathers. And this past December, after all the work and relationship building and trust of getting people to understand what our struggles are in life, I was able to get my immigration fixed in December. So now I can travel, which is really exciting. But at the same time, I did Ancestry.com. Not for any reason. I knew that nobody on my family side would do Ancestry, just because it's not the thing they would do. But I just wanted to see what would pop up. And sure, I'm shocking to get hit by all the side of family of my father's side that I'd never expected to find out more information on my father. I was able to get pictures of my father for the first time after, you know, my 52 years of life, to see what he looks like. I found out that I have an 89-year-old brother living in Bakersfield, California. I mean, come on, I have another brother now. I mean, these things, and my niece reached out and was like, wow, you know, I can't believe this. My father's struggling to, you know, to get a grasp on what this means. And I said, hey, I don't want anything from any of you. I just spit into a cup and I put the information out there, and I'm just grateful that I know more information about myself. I'm just grateful that you reached out to me, because now I have a better sense of who I am. I always wished and dreamed I knew who my father was, or what kind of man he was, and why the way that I am. And it was maybe because of my mother, because she is such a loving, giving woman, and very outspoken woman. But I know there are other traits that I am that she isn't, and I always suspected they were from my father. So to hear my niece tell me stories of my father, of what a good man he was, what a nice man he was. He always tried to be a certain way for his family. I'm like, wow, I get why I'm this other way. And it's nice and it's comforting to know that, that the unknown it's often comforting when it's positive, right? Because it could have been horror stories, but I'm just grateful to know that my father was a nice man, and it's my brother, I guess, is still struggling to think that I want something from him, and I haven't had a conversation with him, only through my niece, and I've just a couple of weeks ago reiterated, no, if anything, I would love to meet anyone that would love to meet me, but I want nothing other than knowing that I have family.
That's crazy. It's crazy how Ancestry.com can, like, spitting into a cup can tell you so much.
Oh my God, it is so crazy. I mean, that's the awesome thing. We are all connected somehow. If we just allowed ourselves to be open to think that we are, because we would be connected to so many more people. We often close our brains out of the things, or ourselves out, or put up walls because we don't know, or we're afraid. But I think the more that we allow ourselves to be open-minded, open-hearted, we're so much more connected to other people than we think we are.
You mentioned that your mother was very outspoken. What's something or a few things that she was outspoken about?
She, at the same as trying to be a mom and trying to be, never trying to be our best friend or anything like that, but trying to be the ruler, I think she often told us like it is, too straightforward. She was a little too straightforward and honest in her speech with us. That scared me a little bit, because I was like, is she kidding? Is she not? But that was part of, I think, that created her humor. It was a little dark. And that's kind of the person that I am. My humor is a little dark, and people don't get me, like, is this guy serious? But I don't mean anything by harm. And I think that's because my mother was so outspoken that she just really told us how it was. She was like, look, it's not going to be easy, but you got to do X, Y, and Z if you really want to make this happen for yourself. Or we'd be out somewhere and she'd just speak out, and I'm like, well, you can't do that. We're going to get in trouble. But I found it in a way that she did it with her heart, right? She didn't do it for herself. She did it because she saw something else. She saw an injustice, or she saw something that she needed to speak up for. And I found that unspokenness kind of scared me being young, because I was always afraid to speak out myself to my mother, because we were always told, never speak out to me. You're gonna get my hand across, I was always afraid of thinking I can never tell my mother what I really feel, because I'm not supposed to, but yet I'm watching her do this in public. So it's a really weird way of teaching us how to be, but I am that person now. I'm so much more outspoken, and I don't allow things around me. I don't laugh at the things that are wrong, or if I find that it's a joke that is off-putting, I'll say, hey, think about this, and I don't ever try to be part of it, but I kind of help other people. As an elderly person now, I find that I have a responsibility just to kind of give my objective, hey, that isn't nice, because look at it this way, because it could have been you in this situation, right? So, because not often can everybody see themselves in somebody else's position or somebody else's shoes. So I'm glad that I can be at a place to be a voice of that.
Yeah, for sure. And was there anything that particularly struck you that you remember, like a moment
of
her saying something blunt, like you were talking about?
No, in the funny little things. I mean, we can be at a Mexican restaurant, especially, and she'll look at the menu and she'll call the waiter over and say, how dare can you charge us $5 for a side of rice? when you know it only costs $1. You know, it's things like that, you know, on the funny side that like, Mom, you can't say that. It's embarrassing. Or I'll take her to a really nice restaurant. And of course it was, where do you want to go? Take me to a Mexican restaurant. Okay, let's go to a Mexican restaurant. And she'll call the, you know, after the meal's over and we've had a nice time, she'll call the waiter over and be like, can I talk to the chef? And I'm like, Mom, why? She's like, no reason. And then she's like, who taught you how to cook? There was too much salt and X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, whoa. And they're all apologetic. Oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry. You know, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, Mom, you can't do that. First of all, you have to think of, you know, it's things like that, you know, and I bring the light ones up because, you know, I can only imagine, we could be in church and she can tell a lady, you know, that's really nice, not nice of you to be coughing in front of, I'm like, Mom, she's only coughing. Or you know, or like parents do try to school other kids issues when they see them behaving badly. I'm like, Mom, those aren't your kids, none of your business. But she'd often speak up when and I think I saw it often as wrong, but she was only speaking up for the good, right? She saw an opportunity to say, hey, that's injustice. So I was afraid of her speaking up, you know, and it's interesting that, you know, you're saying that because that television show, what would you do? My mom was always that person speaking up, and I was always afraid of, oh no, we're going to be in trouble. But that's why I'm so glad that she did, because she allowed me to see the injustice in things and be able to speak up. And I never really realized that until you asked me that question right now. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I really admire that bluntness. I feel like it's a cultural thing. In American culture, for sure, it's less blunt.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Well, I don't know. It's very New Yorkers are very blunt in that sense. Very you know, they got somewhere to go. They don't have time for the short talk, and they got to go somewhere. Coming from the West Coast, I feel that, and it's just a way of being. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just, you know, it's directiveness. Sometimes being direct is the best way to be.
Yeah. And going back to your family stories, did your mother tell you about her journey to the United States? Like what that first day was like, or?
What I can remember, it was just really this, she didn't really tell me much of the whole journey of getting from San Potosi to getting to Tijuana, with the journey with the band, because I think they were just performing and she was just loving what she did. So she didn't have anything bad to say. All I know that they didn't have a lot of money, and they were walking a lot or jumping on back of trucks, you know, with chickens and things, as anyone would do if we would now go to any third world country and want to go like really far into the depths of like countryside. You would jump on the back of a truck, probably have a sheep or a lamb or, you know, something. So it isn't too much off of what we would have today, but pretty awesome to know that she had it in her to say, you know, this is going to be okay, because music is transcendent, you know, it kind of brings joy to people. So she was just doing her go-lucky thing. So I didn't hear much of that journey of getting her there, but I do know that she loved meeting people, and know that she was happy to meet this family, and she didn't find cleaning an issue. She just was doing something good because she knew she was making someone else happy. And I think that's how she brought us up too, is why I have always been in hospitality, because I know that if I can make one other person happy, if I've done my job, if I'm making sure that I can do something for someone else, then I've done my job for the day. But if I can do it 100 times, then I'm a king, you know, and I'm fulfilled by other people's happiness. So I think that's, my mother instilled that in us, and that she just was happy enough to know that she was doing something for someone else, and they saw good enough in her to bring her, right, to give her an opportunity, and to allow her to be part of their family. And my aunts really gave me a great sense of freedom, and a sense of knowing that I didn't have to be put in this box of person that I thought I was, because I was living through their eyes. And I don't know if it's not like it's not like having what your neighbors have or wanting to be like anybody else, but I did, because all my cousins, they're all blonde hair and blue-eyed from New Jersey. And I saw myself just like them. They all treated me just like them. All their friends were all blonde hair and blue-eyed Americans. So they were rock and rollers. They had a pool. They had all these amenities that I don't think we ever would have had if it wasn't for their lifestyle and the way they lived. So it gave me a sense of freedom of knowing that we weren't less than, or we had to hide or be different because my mother was a maid. And I never felt my mother was a maid, because I got treated just like my cousins got treated. We all got presents. We all got to ride the motorcycles. We all went to camp together. We all did these things. So, and to this day, they're my cousins, and I get to see their kids. And it's pretty awesome how when people allow themselves to be open, that there is no boundary of who you are as a person until we're told that person's black, white, orange, blue-haired, oh, pierced, or this is wrong, this is right, that we start putting these walls up in our head. But if no one ever tells us these things, we're just like everybody else. So I think that freedomness, and I heard my mother's journeys of coming here were always good because she appreciated all that was given to her.
Was she able to continue singing when she came here?
No, my mother didn't do any singing. The only singing we did was in church. So my mother's very religious. So every Sunday that I can remember, we went to church, and there we were. My mother was singing, holding our hands. And at the beginning of that kind of thing, I'm like, I'd always be embarrassed. I'm like, Mom, you're singing so loud. But I knew that I finally got, I loved it. I started singing, and I knew that expression from your heart felt so good. So I started singing in church with my mom, and my brothers and sisters were embarrassed. Were like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm singing, but it is it's such a freedom to be able to, if you are any creative artist, writing is creating. So it's a sense of freedom. So I loved going to church then finally with my mother so she can sing.
What are the religious customs that you grew up with?
I'm Catholic. So it was mostly just, listen to your parents, and, and if you go against God, you got to go confession. So just the basic Catholic rules in the house. My mother was afraid of a lot of things, so she kind of made us afraid. And she did put a sense of that God was going to not love us enough if we were bad. So that was kind of weird, because I knew that God was all about love. I knew that in my heart of heart that God could only love, so he couldn't create anything bad. He couldn't do anything bad. So that helped me as in my coming out stages of life, that I knew I couldn't be wrong, because all God did was made love, and any flowers, everything life was beautiful. So, and if God was part of that, how can I be wrong? So it was a hard struggle with that in the sense of religion and who I was and who I became, because I knew I wasn't a bad person, and I knew I didn't do bad things. I was just told by religion that I was a bad person, so that kind of messed me up a little bit. But I think because my mother was so strong, and I'm not allowing me to get lost in what was always wrong, that and because she gave me the voice, I kind of questioned things. So it helped me through things. So religion was tough. Religion was good and bad for me. It kind of spoke to me and gave me a sense of loss, because it didn't allow me to be me anymore for a very long time when I loved it so much. But then I found who I was and loved religion again, because I'm a spiritual person, and I know that it's not the church's fault. It's just tradition's fault often, because we get so lost in what we're taught and told, as opposed to what our hearts feel often. And I think we should always listen with our heart first and not with our head, but that's just me.
No, I love that. I agree. What do you call your mom and your grandmother?
I call mom or mommy. My grandmother's passed now, but I talk to her every day because I'm grateful for what she, the strong person she's made me. And I just called her grandma, abuelita, we called her in Spanish. My mother was learning to speak English when we were growing up, and my grandmother never learned to speak English. So we spoke both in the house. But whenever my grandmother was around, we only spoke Spanish. So she didn't think that we were talking about her, because she thought anytime we were speaking in English, we were talking about her.
And I don't know how much time you have, so maybe you could tell me like one specific story from growing up in what was it called? La
Puente?
La Puente. Or who was your best friend, if you can't think of a specific story.
I can tell you something. There are literally a lot of good stories. You know, I sang in the chorus early on in school, so we would always have caroling, right? So the only way I can give back, because we didn't have a lot, because our neighbors were so good to us. My Grandma Alice, there was a woman next to us named Alice, and when we moved into that house, she said, "Call me Grandma Alice, anything you need." And she would always make chicken and dumplings for us. So once a month, we got this awesome pot of chicken and dumplings. She was from Arkansas, and I'd never had Southern food, and man, that was delicious. So I dream of chicken and dumplings like nobody's business. I've never had them the same. So it's things like that. So for Christmas, I would gather the kids together and go caroling. And I would literally go to all the houses that I knew that had helped me or touched my life somehow. And I'd have like 6 or 8 kids go door to door, and we would just go caroling. And that was it always felt so good, because just the simple little thing of us sharing our voice made so many people happy and brought tears that it wasn't I never wanted the tears to happen, because whenever I see people cry, I always think it hurts. But then it reminds me of how much joy it brought so many people. And your singing can bring someone to tears, that you have brought them to the most vulnerable state of them being. So, and that's beautiful. So I love I love to sing, because I know that it really touches people in ways. Often we don't know how somebody's feeling or what is going on in their personal life, but a little bit of music changes the whole dynamic of that feeling. So that's pretty awesome. So I think those simple little things of being able to know that I used to go with the neighborhood kids, and they trusted me enough to go to door to door to sing for families who they didn't know, just to bring a little bit of love in their life. And that I was able to do it. That is powerful to me, and I love doing those things.
One thing I forgot to ask is years. So when did your mother come to the United States?
The first time she came here was in 1960, I think 63, 62 was the first time she came to the United States. And then soon after that, I had my sister. And then, so she must have come here obviously a couple of years before she had my sister. But then she kept going back. So that's kind of weird too. I had never asked my mother those questions, because she'd have my sister and left her with the family, with my American family, and then went back. And I don't know how much time difference there was when she would leave one of my siblings behind. I know I was left for 9 months in Mexico without my mother. She left me with my grandmother, and then came back for me. So I don't know what happened in those 9 months. I never heard any of those stories. So there are things that in my life that I wish I would have known still before my grandmother passed. So, as much as you can, 𝘄𝗵𝗄, get all those stories from your grandmother, from your mother. I mean, and do everything you can to listen to your family and your parents, because I mean, they've got so much wisdom, and so all they're looking out is for the best of you. And they're always, and to this day, our parents are probably they still want for the best of you. So they're going to stop you from doing things you really, really, really want to do, but know that you have the rest of your life ahead of you to do what you want. So,
Thank you.
You got it.
Words of wisdom. And what year was it when you went to college?
I went to college in 1986, and I graduated in 89. And those were probably some of the best times of my life too. I can go on and on and on. I'm not going to bore you with my. So I'm just grateful for your time and that you're doing this. I think it's pretty awesome. And I look forward to seeing. Are you able to share your project at the end?
Yeah, so I'll send you the recording as soon as it finishes. It's gonna, wait, I'll stop the recording.